The month is officially over, and that means it's time for a wrap up. Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex, and today is the November 2024 wrap-up, so everything I read in November with the ratings. If you've been with my channel for like the last couple weeks or whatever, you know that November was super weird for me. Yeah, I didn't get much reading done. And a lot of it was because I was so backed up with work. I worked so hard in November, and then more of it was because I was traveling, and I'm just exhausted, and I can feel the exhaustion of December just really already setting in. So I don't know how December's gonna go either, but yeah, I really don't want to make a long intro or anything, so let's take a moment to go over my rating system, and then we will get into my book reviews for November. 5 stars is best of the best. I had no notes. I absolutely loved it. And I would recommend this book to anybody and everybody. 4 stars means I still really liked it, but I had minor issues like pace. Maybe there were some plot holes. I still really enjoyed it, but it did not deserve the 5 stars. 3 stars means I didn't like it, but it was a subjectivity issue, which means it was probably just not the right book for me. Wasn't the right reader for it, and that's fine. I would still recommend it to people I know would probably really like the book or the genre or whatever, but for whatever reason, it was not a good fit for me. 2 stars means I did not like it and I wouldn't recommend it. It had fundamental issues, and I did not enjoy reading it. 1 star is the worst of the worst. I absolutely hated the book. It wasted my time. I would never recommend it to anybody, and I probably will never read the author again. I reserve my 1 star ratings for books that are truly like heinous, like they have to be blatantly homophobic, racist, culturally appropriated. I also reserve these ratings for books that glorify grooming or rape or anything like that. So yeah, I don't get to give the 1 star really often, which is kind of nice because like that means it's like a truly horrid book. But yeah, and there's no 1 stars today, so don't worry about that. So yeah, super short intro, but let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. The first book I read in November was Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Okay, this was chosen for my book club, and it was very long, you guys. It was so long. I don't read long books, and this is kind of why, because it took up the majority of my month. The first reason why it took so long for me to read it is because I had so much trouble getting it. And I knew I had to do this on audio because there was just no way I was going to be able to physically read it with the way that my work schedule was going in November. I knew it wasn't going to happen. So I was determined to get this on audiobook because I knew there was no way I was going to be able to get through it. The audiobook was like 17 hours. But I got through it. Okay, I did. And honestly, this was a pretty good book. So let's get with the premise, all right? We have a female main character, Peyton, and we are living in a very dystopian world where we have different class sets based on their magical abilities. I'll put that lightly, okay? Because there's a lot of world building here that I'm not going to get into. Basically, there are the elites, and they have very strong powers that are really like important, you know, and then there are mundanes, and they have powers that are less practical, I would say, or not easy to use. And this is sort of an easy class system to break down. You know, the mundanes sort of live in hovel type situations, and the elites are obviously like richer and better off. And then on the other side of this, we have people that are powerless. I mean, they literally don't have any magical powers at all. And in this world that we're living in, it is basically illegal to not have a power. And the kingdom has taken it upon themselves to weed out people that do not have powers and dispose of them. And we don't really get into why this is such a thing in this story. I'm assuming this is part of a trilogy. I'm assuming this comes out more in other books, but we're really doing a lot of foundation work in this book. Peyton is a mundane that lives in poverty, and as a result of her living in poverty, she becomes a very good thief. While she is living in her little world thieving, she accidentally steals from a prince that is the enforcer for the kingdom. And it is his job to remove all of the illegals from their world and dispose of them. So as we're sort of getting this breakdown, we're getting Peyton's point of view and we're getting Kai's point of view, which is the enforcer, the son of the king, the second son of the king. As we're sort of getting this world building and everything, we're introduced to the trials, which is basically like Hunger Games but with magic. We do not really get into the trials. Like we get into the trials, but not in a way that's like, this is why we have it, this is the outcome, this is how we choose a winner. A lot of that is very glossy, which I took issue with, but you know, it is what it is. So we soon find out that not only is Kai on the list to perform in the trials, Peyton is also put on the list to perform in the trials. So she must now join the other contestants for the trials at the kingdom, and it is basically a fight to the death-ish type situation. And so yeah, this is the first book out of the trilogy, like I said, and we're following Peyton and Kai through the journey of the trials as they both try to come out the other side. A lot of people said that this is a romantasy. I would definitely not say that. I would categorize this as YA, but I also wouldn't, because I don't think that Kai and Peyton are under 18, which to me is the definition of YA if you're under 18. I would more call this a coming of age type story, and I would definitely not say fantasy. I would say more dystopian. But I know the reason that people say fantasy is because people actually have powers in this book. So I do get what they mean. The romance part of it, very, very, very light. This is a clean book, okay? No spice or anything like that. So if you're looking for something that has no spice, I would say this. The banter in this book, oh, very good, okay? The banter was bantering, right? I really enjoyed the dialogue of this book. Some things I didn't like. One, super long. It was really long for me because now when I look back on the book, I don't know where the time went. Like I said, we did not get into the trials that much. Like, we were in the trials, we were seeing it. There was not a breakdown of what was happening, why we were there, the point of the trials, any of that. There was also not a lot of backstory on how we ended up in the place where we were, where, you know, people without powers were being prosecuted, persecuted, and killed, basically, eliminated. That we did not really get the story of why this was a thing, why this happened, how it all came to be. And so I do think that was a misstep, because when you look back on it now, we weren't covering the major parts of the book. So where were all the pages going to? Because the world building here was not very complex, which is one of the reasons why I really liked it, because it was very easy for me to digest. If y'all have been on my channel a minute, you know the reason I steer away from fantasy is because sometimes it is so difficult. Like, I feel like I'm working the entire time to put the world together because the world building is so complex. The world building here was very easy, very digestible, and I really enjoyed it because it was not terribly difficult. So again, I don't know where all the time went in this book. So pace was a really big issue for me, especially in the first half of the book. I thought it moved quite slowly. I did question a lot of the decisions that Peyton made in the book. And I'm basically just going to chalk it up to she just had a lot of trauma, okay? And she was not emotionally prepared to make difficult decisions. I'm just going to stick with that because I feel like that is the answer. Otherwise, I don't know. I feel like she was just not ready to make the hard decisions. And so she panicked a little bit. I could actually see myself finishing this series, which is really interesting because you guys know I'm not a big fantasy person. This I could get into. I think if you liked Hunger Games, and then a lot of people have said if you like Red Queen, I haven't read that, but if you have and you really liked it, a lot of people said this is a lot like Hunger Games and Red Queen. I would say Hunger Games with magic, okay? And I'll be interested to see how it turns out. I can definitely see me finishing this series. I don't think the third book is out yet. I think it comes out next year, so I still have a little bit of time to read book 2, I guess. I ended up giving this 4 stars. Like I said, world building was really easy. The banter was really good. The dialogue was really good. I really was attracted to the idea of this world. I just think the foundation was not quite set. So I'm hoping maybe in the second or third book that a lot more of those foundational issues will come up again, and that we'll kind of get a clear, defined answer of why things were the way they were. Yeah, this one was surprising, but it took up a majority of my month. Okay, so basically after I finished Powerless, I had like a week left in November. Plus I was traveling for the holiday, and it was like, what am I going to read? And I knew I wanted to read a book by an Indigenous author because November is Indigenous Heritage Month, and that was really important for me to read a book by an Indigenous author. And so I ran down the list of books I put in the Maybe series, right? I could not get any of them. The only one that I could get was the Stephen Graham Jones book, Angel of Indian Lake. Y'all, that book is also really long, and I knew I just did not have enough time to finish it because I think the audio for that was going to be like 13 or 14 hours. It was going to be way too much for me to try and finish in a week. So I knew I couldn't do it. And then the other couple books I put on the list, the Richard Wagame's book and the Joy Harjo book, I could not get. Nobody had them. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So I ran down my list of like tried and true authors that I really like, the Indigenous authors. And I came up with Cherie Dimaline. She wrote the Marrow Thieves book, the duology. Absolutely love that book. And so I went on and I looked and see what audiobooks I could get by Cherie Dimaline. And I picked Empire of Wild, okay? This book really threw me, okay? Because I've only read Cherie Dimaline in terms of YA, and this is not a YA book. So basically we have Joan, and she lives on an acreage property with her husband Victor and her grandmother Mare. And basically Joan and Victor have a really big fight one night, and Victor says, I'm going out, and then Victor never comes back. Joan and basically their whole community and her family searched for Victor for a long time, and it's been almost a year since he's gone missing, and nobody knows where he is. Joan is very distraught, as you can imagine, and doesn't really know how to deal with this situation. So one night while she's out getting really drunk, which has become a more normal thing for her, she stumbles upon a revival tent, which is also a really weird thing to see considering they're in more indigenous populated areas. So she goes in as kind of a joke, and she finds Victor, except Victor doesn't know who she is. Victor doesn't even call himself Victor anymore. And this is how the story sort of unspools of how Victor came to be this way, how he's here, and how he doesn't recognize Joan, and what Joan is willing to do to get him back. So when I went into this book, I was not expecting this to be an Indigenous folklore story, but it is, okay? And typically when I read Indigenous folklore, like the highlight character, like the villain of the folklore story is always going to be like the Wendigo or something along those lines. So we got a new villain, folklore villain, and this one called the Rougarou. And I'd never heard of this before, and so it was really cool to kind of see the different stories and sort of unravel this folklore story. So I really, really liked that. The gore was surprisingly not bad, okay? There were some really cool moments, and we're really getting a lot of different perspectives in this book. Like, we're not just following Joan, we're also following another character in the book that is sort of seen as the enemy, and then we're also following Victor in a capacity that I'm not going to tell you about because, like, it'll kind of give away parts of the book. But yeah, I wasn't really expecting this to be a folklore story. I was expecting it to be something else. But it really, really surprised me, and I ended up really liking it. There's also a ton of conversations about, like, tribal politics and things like that. Also how decisions get made for the tribe. And then, like, I would also say lots of Christian nationalist vibes in this book. If that is a struggle for you, I'm going to tell you right now, there's a lot, okay? But I think that this is a really interesting balance because it's something that people don't really talk about is the divide between Indigenous people that are more traditional or practice their faith and beliefs in a more traditional way to their ancestors, and indigenous people that follow Christianity. And there's a whole bucket of people that fall in the middle of that as well. I think if you follow indigenous creators like on socials like Insta and TikTok and things like that, you would get a much better depth of insight from them, because obviously they have more insight to that than I do, obviously. So I would recommend, if you follow anybody on those channels, to kind of listen to what they have to say as opposed to just listening to me, and also just read books by indigenous authors. But I think that the thing that people don't really think about, someone told me this a really long time ago, but that the first people that had to decolonize themselves were indigenous people. And some people have made great strides in that decolonization, but there are some people and some groups that have not. And it's sort of a really big issue that is happening within tribal matters. Again, I'm not an expert. I don't have a lot of opinions about that. I think it's interesting to learn these things because it's something, as me, as a white person, it's something I literally don't think about on a regular basis. And so it opens your mind a little bit to what other people are going through, basically. Anyway, I won't bore you anymore with that conversation. I think that you should look into following indigenous creators to get their insight on things like that, and also read books. And I think this book in particular really highlighted that. And so I really enjoyed the context of that, and how that Christian nationalism almost fit into the folklore of it, and how it was sort of manipulated and twisted. And I thought it was a really interesting perspective. So I really appreciate Cherie Dimaline doing that in this book, and I wasn't expecting it, but I really liked it. So I ended up giving this 4 stars, and the reason it didn't get 5 stars is because of the ending. It was a bit of a cliffhanger, if I'm honest, and I was really sitting here thinking, okay, she's probably written a sequel. I thought maybe this was going to be a duology, but she wrote this book in 2019. That's when it was published, okay? It's 2024 now, and there's not been a sequel, and there's not been a whisper of a sequel coming anywhere that I can find. So I really think this is a standalone book, and if it is, I was really disappointed in the ending because I think she really left me hanging. Other than that, though, I really liked this. I did it on audio. The reader for this was fantastic, and I had a great time with it. So yeah, I was really happy I picked up this book. Okay, that's it. I know I got 2 books in for November, but you know what? Honestly, I was proud of myself because the one book was really, really big, and I was super bogged down with work. Like, I actually had to shut down my site so that I could breathe a little bit because I was getting so overbooked so continuously. Which, on the one hand, I'm so thankful, grateful, it's amazing, I'm so proud of myself, but on the other hand, I need rest. Everyone needs rest, everyone needs to recharge, and I am having to take a big recharge. So yeah, I don't know what December is going to hold for me. I'm optimistic, but I also need to be realistic. So we shall see. I'm going to be honest, I'm not uploading next week. I know I always say I upload every week. I'm not uploading next week. I am going to be traveling with my family. And yeah, I had thought for a minute that maybe I would set up a travel vlog and upload it, but it's just not going to work out. And honestly, like, I don't want to work. I want to go away with my family and not work and not think about work. And yeah, so I will meet you guys back here in another week. And yeah, there's plenty to watch on my channel if you want more to watch. There's plenty to peruse through, and I'll be excited to come back and see you guys. So yeah, make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know when I'm posting. And that's all from me today, and I will see you all next time. Bye!